Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going back in time a bit to 2010. Yeah, 2010 was a pretty big year for AI, especially for computer vision. So get your reading glasses ready. We're taking a deep dive into this paper. It's called Learning to Combine Foveal Glimpses with a Third-Order Boltzmann Machine. And yeah, no, that title's a mouthful. But believe me, this paper was a game changer. It was one of the first to really explore how to make computers see, more like how we see, focusing on the important stuff, not just trying to process everything at once.
What's really fascinating about this paper is that it kind of set the stage for what we now call attention mechanisms in AI, which has become like a fundamental concept, especially in computer vision.
Exactly. It's like giving computers the power of selective attention, something us humans totally take for granted. So for all you techies out there listening, consider this your history lesson, but like a history lesson with some pretty major implications for the future of AI. So let's dive into it. The paper kicks off by talking about the big challenges of traditional computer vision systems.
Yeah, back then most systems were analyzing images very differently from how humans do. Think about like a security camera versus your own eyes. The camera's just capturing everything with the same level of detail. It doesn't matter what's actually important in the scene. But our eyes, they use foveal vision, so we see in high res in the center and then lower res in our peripheral. And that lets us process all this visual information way more efficiently by focusing on what matters most.
So this paper is saying, what if we just borrowed that foveal vision approach to make computer vision more efficient?
Exactly. And that's where the whole idea of glimpses comes in. Just like our eyes darting around a scene, right? Focusing on different interesting areas. This model takes these selective glimpses of an image. Each glimpse is capturing information from a specific spot with different resolutions.
Okay, so I'm kind of visualizing this now. But how does the model decide where to look next? Is it just like randomly jumping around the image?
Not at all. It actually uses what the authors call a fixation point strategy. So basically the model learns where to look next based on what it's already seen from its previous glimpses.
Wow, that's fascinating. So it's not even just about seeing, it's about knowing where to look. It's like this model is developing its own visual search strategy.
Exactly. And this is where it starts to get really similar to how we explore the world visually, too. If you look at Figure 1 in the paper, it illustrates this whole process really well.
You're right. Figure 1 really shows how the model is using those glimpses to hone in on the important parts of the image. But there's got to be some serious computation going on in the background. To make all this work, this is where the Boltzmann machine comes in. Right. Yeah.
Got it. Think of the Boltzmann machine as like the brain behind this whole operation. It's this type of artificial neural network that's really good at learning complex patterns from data.
Okay, so we're mimicking how humans see by focusing on specific areas. And then we're using this Boltzmann machine to help the computer understand what it's seeing. But this paper uses a special kind of Boltzmann machine, right? Something about third-order connections. What makes that different from your average Boltzmann machine?
That's a great question. So most Boltzmann machines use what are called pairwise connections, meaning they're learning the relationships between pairs of data points. But this paper, they used a third-order Boltzmann machine, which means it can actually learn relationships between triplets of data points.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the advantage of having these third-order connections? What kind of information can they capture that regular pairwise connections can't?
Here's where things get really interesting. In this model, those third-order connections let it link together not only what it's seeing in each glimpse, but also where it's looking. It's like having a short-term memory for visual attention. It's not just remembering like a single snapshot. It's actually connecting the dots between all those different glimpses and building up this kind of more complete understanding of the image over time.
So it's not just remembering what it saw.
Right.
It's understanding how all those pieces fit together.
Exactly. It's like the difference between glancing at individual words in a sentence versus actually reading the whole sentence, those third-order connections. They give the model that ability to understand the context and the relationships between different parts of the image.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So we've got this model mimicking human vision with these foveal glimpses, using this superpowered Boltzmann machine to process all that visual information. But how do you actually train it to see? Like, what's the learning process here?
So the paper really focuses on two main learning tasks. They call them what-where combination and learning where to look.
Okay, let's break those down. What's what-where combination all about?
So basically, it's teaching the model to put together information from all those different glimpses. And it has to consider both things, right? The content of each glimpse, like what it's seeing, and then also the location, so where it's looking.
So it's not just about recognizing like a shape or a color. It's about understanding where that shape or color is in relation to everything else.
Precisely. Think of it this way. You see a blue circle and a red square. Individually, they're just shapes and colors, right?
Right.
But if you know that the blue circle is above the red square, suddenly you have this much richer understanding of the whole scene.
I like that analogy. So what-where combination. It's all about building up that spatial understanding.
Right.
What about the second learning task? Learning where to look. That sounds even more interesting.
Yeah, this is where it gets really cool. Remember we talked about that fixation point strategy earlier? Well, the model doesn't just magically know the best places to look. It has to learn that too. And that's what the second learning task is all about.
Oh, wow. So it's like the model is literally learning to control its own attention. It's figuring out the most informative spots to focus on.
Exactly.
But how does it actually learn that? It's not like we can just tell, hey, look over there.
Right. It all comes down to what the researchers call the controller. Think of it like a separate system. That's watching what the Boltzmann machine is learning, and then uses that information to kind of predict the most useful places to look at next.
So the Boltzmann machine is like the eyes,
Right.
taking in the visual information,
Yeah.
and then the controller is like the brain, deciding where to point those eyes.
That's a great way to put it. And the really amazing thing is, both the Boltzmann machine and the controller, they're learning together. So as the Boltzmann machine gets better at recognizing patterns, the controller gets better at guiding its attention.
Like they're teaching each other in this whole learning process. It actually led to some pretty amazing results.
Oh, yeah.
So the researchers, they tested their model on 3 different data sets.
Okay.
The first one was MNIST, that classic data set of handwritten digits.
Ah, MNIST, the hello world of computer vision.
Exactly.
What did they find?
So get this. With only 4 glimpses per image, their model was already achieving accuracy comparable to systems that were trained on the full images.
Wow, really? That's impressive.
Yeah.
Using way less information.
It was able to recognize those handwritten digits almost as well as traditional systems. But it was only looking at these 4 tiny parts of the image.
That's incredible.
Wow.
That's really efficient.
Huge win for efficiency.
Right.
But recognizing digits, that's one thing. Did they test it on anything more complex?
They did. To really push this controller concept, they actually created a whole synthetic data set just to test its ability, to learn that optimal fixation strategy.
A synthetic data set, so not real-world images this time.
Exactly. They designed these images specifically to see if the controller could learn the best way to search for something. Imagine a grid, and you have to figure out if there's a horizontal or vertical bar hidden somewhere near the edge.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Kind of like a simplified version of Battleship.
Exactly. Now imagine there's a symbol right in the center of the grid. That gives you a hint about where to look for the bar. That's essentially what this data set was like.
Interesting.
The controller's job was to learn how to interpret that symbol and then guide the model's gaze to the right spot.
So they built a visual puzzle.
Yeah.
And how'd the model do?
It aced it, achieved perfect accuracy on this task.
Wow.
Meaning it learned to always focus on the region with the bar and correctly identify
Right.
if it was horizontal or vertical.
That's really impressive. So it crushed the handwritten digits. It dominated the Battleship challenge.
Yeah.
What was their final test?
For the grand finale, they decided to test it on something even more complex, facial expressions.
Oh, wow.
They wanted to see if the model could actually learn to recognize human emotions from images.
Okay, that's a whole other level. Even humans have trouble with that sometimes.
I know, right?
Like, how did the model even, how'd it do?
Okay, so they used this data set with all these images of people showing different emotions, happiness, sadness, anger, and so on.
Okay.
And believe it or not, the model was able to achieve similar, and in some cases even better accuracy than a traditional system that was trained on the full images of the faces.
Hold on. So it is better at recognizing emotions, even though it was only looking at little snippets of the face. How is that even possible?
That's the really cool part about this whole approach, it turns out. By focusing on just the most informative areas, like the eyes or the mouth, the model was able to learn more distinctive features for recognizing those expressions.
It's not even about seeing more. It's about seeing smarter.
Exactly.
It's about knowing what to focus on and what to ignore.
Exactly. Think about how we do it in real life. We don't just stare at someone's whole face, trying to take everything in at once. We focus on those key features, like the crinkles around the eyes, or the way the mouth is turned up or down. And that's what this model was able to do.
That's amazing. Just by taking inspiration
Yeah.
from the way that we see, this research achieved some seriously impressive results.
Absolutely. This paper was so far ahead of its time, and this was back in 2010, long before attention mechanisms became this core concept in AI.
This paper was like planting a seed,
Yeah.
and now we're seeing it grow all these years later. Like all those principles they outlined, they've had this huge impact on the field.
Absolutely.
And it all started with this simple but powerful idea. What if computers could see the world the way we do? This whole deep dives has been amazing. It really shows how much we can achieve just by taking inspiration from ourselves, like mimicking human cognition can lead to these big breakthroughs in AI.
I completely agree. And it's a good reminder that sometimes the key to moving forward isn't about just processing more information. It's about processing it smarter.
So for all our listeners out there, many of you are tech professionals yourselves. What would you say are like the biggest takeaways from this paper? The things that are still super relevant, even all these years later.
That's a great question. Even though this research is from 2010, the ideas they presented are still hugely influential today, especially as we're moving towards more and more human-like AI.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about the controller we were discussing, that concept of having this separate system that learns how to guide attention. Well, that's basically evolved into what we now call attention mechanisms in AI.
And attention mechanisms are everywhere now.
Oh yeah, they're everywhere. Everything from natural language processing to image recognition, even robotics, they all use them. They allow these AI systems to really zero in on the most important parts of whatever input they're getting, just like our brains do.
Yeah. So you're saying this paper from 2010, with its talk of glimpses and Boltzmann machines, actually laid the groundwork for one of the most fundamental ideas in AI today.
Exactly. It just goes to show you how powerful it can be to draw inspiration from biology. And we're trying to solve these really complex problems in AI.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
It really has.
We covered a ton of ground, from foveal vision to Boltzmann machines to the birth of attention mechanisms.
And it's incredible to think how much progress has been made just in the years since this paper came out. It makes you wonder what the future holds as we keep exploring this intersection of human cognition and artificial intelligence.
I know, right? It's an exciting time to be in the field. But for now, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. But I want to leave you with one last thought. If mimicking human vision can revolutionize computer vision, what other human abilities might hold the key to the next generation of AI? Something to ponder. Until our next deep dive.